되는 거. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start very soon, so if you could please have a seat, please. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very delighted to welcome you to our event. Before we begin, let me share some pieces of information. First, the session is currently live streamed on the YouTube channel of COP28 Korea Pavilion. And second, it is unfortunate news that Professor Seung-Jik Yu could not attend the event. He organized this event as a primary speaker, but due to his personal circumstances, he could not attend. And I'm sure that he's watching now on the live stream. So, so if you like, you can wave your hand, maybe. Yeah. So to begin, welcome again to our event on Global Stocktake of 2030 Mitigation Implementation through Global Local Integrated Analysis of Greenhouse Gas and Air Pollutant Emission. That's a long topic, but yeah. So it is very meaningful to address this topic here at COP28, well, the GST of global climate actions and implementation is actually happening. So as many of you are well aware of, emissions of greenhouse gases and air pollutants are transboundary issues, which yield severe consequential and cumulative impacts on our environment, economy, and society. In this regard, Konkuk University and Sookmyang Women's University have developed the so-called guide model. It's an integrated assessment modeling system. And they have been working on its improvements and advancements for maybe more than 6 years, and in collaboration with IASA. They did the advancements, especially in terms of spatio-temporal resolution and detailed methodology. So you will see that in their presentation. So we have 4 interesting and informative presentations and the panel discussion. I would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished speakers and panelists who have kindly agreed to share their expertise and knowledge on this topic. I am very eagerly looking forward to hearing from them. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Ms. Soo-yeon Jung, an experienced researcher of climate modeling lab at Sookmyang Women's University. In her presentation, she will guide you through our model guide, comparing its national level model with the local level and presenting the results of them. Please give a warm round of applause, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Soo-yeon Jung, the researcher of Climate Modeling Laboratory at Sookmyang Women's University. And today I'm gonna talk about the research project that we are working on, which is developing the model name of guide. Today I'll tell you what the guide model is, and because it is very big project that 6 universities and 3 institutes are participating. So I would like to tell you what the Sungmyeong take part of it and some results of the guide model. So the guide stands for Greenhouse Gases and Air Pollutants Unified Information Design System for Environment. It is integrated assessment model to consider integrate impact of greenhouse gases and air pollutants by simultaneously optimizing net cost of greenhouse gases and air pollutants. It is very important because there are multi-polluters who emit greenhouse gas and air pollutant at the same time. So it is very important to manage them comprehensively together. So our project covers both global and local level. The guide global covers all over the world with a focus on Northeast Asia countries, and the guide local model covers Korea in detail. We expect that it will be a powerful tool for policymakers supporting their decision making for climate change policies. It is currently under development on collaboration with 6 universities, including Sungmyeong and Konkuk University, and 3 institutes, including IASA. And this whole team is led by Professor Jung-Hun Woo from Konkuk University, who thankfully joined us. So Sungmyeong University is we are contribute to guide local model, and we are working on energy and greenhouse gas emissions projection and optimization module of guide local models. So we are doing 2 things: energy projection and optimization. For the energy and greenhouse gas emissions projections, we provisionally called our model as GEMCO, Greenhouse Gas Emissions and Model of Korea. And for the energy system model, it is named as MITA, standing for Model for Energy Transition and Emission Reductions. This is not the first time that we are developing it. We already have experience for developing the guide Korea for 3 years. But at that time, we consider Korea as a single region, but for this time, when we are developing guide local, we divide Korea into 17 provinces to reflect more of the unique characteristics of each province. So our goal is to develop the model that well represents energy demand and greenhouse gas emissions in Korea. What I mean by well represents is to develop the model who reflect unique characteristics of each province, but also consistent with national model. So we are developing the 17 models for each local province, and also develop the one model at national level. So at this moment, we completed the basic development of developing it and comparing the aggregated results of 17 local and the national model to check if there is a consistency between them. We intended to ensure consistency through 2 points. First one is for data consistency, and the second is for the methodological consistencies. For data, we established database which represents the unique characteristics of 17 provinces for activity data and also for energy data. And for methodology, we use the same econometric methodologies based on statistical relationships between activity and energy for both of the national and local model. There must be the mismatch between them when we just simply aggregate the local and national, but our final goal is to resolve this mismatch and to combine to the one model. So we firstly checking the national local consistency in activity data. We ensure data consistency by collecting national and local data at the same source, if possible. There are some sectors where activity data for a certain province is unavailable. For example, for industry sector, it is very difficult to collect all the regional data because lack of the regional data because there's a lack of data, and even if we collect all the data, the discrepancies may arise between national and local totals of data. For example, when we see the GDP data, some of the regional GDP and GDP is not the same, even if we collect them from the same source, which is KOCs. And for the energy, we collect energy statistics for each 17 province from national and local energy statistics yearbooks annually published by the same institute, which is Korea Energy Economics Institute. But the discrepancies also exist between the national and local totals of energy statistics as well. Especially for industry sector, detailed data on energy source by subsector is absent. So we are alternatively collecting data from other source, which is different from the national one, but the coverage is slightly different from that. There is data gap for certain years. And for the domestic aviation and shipping of transportation sectors, only national energy consumption data, including international bunkering, is existed. So there may be there are difficulty to split the domestic energy consumptions of transportation from international bunkering. From now on, I will show you some results of our projections. For the energy demand for projection results, the difference between national and local level energy consumptions was around 24% up to 2010, but it decreased to 5% afterwards. The difference before 2010 are mainly attributed to the lack of local data in the industry sector. And when we see the projection, the projected emissions from local data are 5% lower compared to those from national data. When you see this figure, the blue line is indicated the national energy, and the red line is the local energy. And we can get the findings from our projections that Korea's energy demand for 2030 will be in the range of the 232 to 240 million TOE. And about the greenhouse gas emissions, the difference between national and local level was around 10 to 30%, which is very similar to the energy demand, but it decreased to 5% afterwards. The projected emissions from local data are 3 to 8% lower compared to those from the national data. And we also see that the economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions for Korea for 2030 will be in the range of 683 to 695 million ton CO2 equivalent. So we want to emphasize what is the key contributing factors to the discrepancies. From the data side, as I mentioned before, it is very difficult to secure complete local data which is consistent with national one. And for sectors unavailable to collect local data, we downscale the national activity data based on the business address information using micro-survey data reported by Korean Emission Trading Scheme compliance entities. But some activity data is allocated to the address of the entity's headquarters rather than the actual location where activities really occur. And from the methodology side, the impact of activity on energy consumption varies locally, despite of using same independent variables. For example, when we estimate gas consumption in residential sector based on the number of households of each province, since the supply rate of the city gas varies by province, each province of the households hold different level of impact on gas consumptions. So it causes disparities between national and local totals, even if we use same estimation model for all province and nation. So to sum up, our goal is to develop energy demand and greenhouse gas projection model named as GAMCO that not only well represents Korea by reflecting the unique characteristics of each province, but also consistent with the national model. And we can see that the projected emissions from local data are 3 to 8% lower compared to those from national. And there are three main reasons for these discrepancies. First one is inconsistency in activity and energy consumption between the national and local. And second one, the errors in local distribution existing in the data itself, particularly for industry and IPPU sector, which is large sector of Korea's greenhouse gas emissions. And third one, the effect of independent variables to the dependent variable is different by regions. And also we learned through the model results that Korea's greenhouse gas emissions for 2030 and 2050 are projected to be in the range of 683 to 695 and 664 to 682 million tons CO2 equivalent respectively. So to ensure the consistency, we will conduct the tuning of the methodology on the next round of this research. For example, we will adjust the local distribution factors or we will try to use variables that better control regional characteristics. And also, we will try to apply the iterative proportional fitting procedure, which is a mathematical adjustment method to aggregate information obtained from two or more datasets. It iteratively and proportionally adjusts the weight of rows. In the case of us, it's regions, and columns. In the case of us, it is fuels to align with the target margins. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Jong. It was a very informative and succinct presentation, which gave us a comprehensive overview of the work on Guide Korea and Guide Local. The next presentation will be about how to further advance the Guide Korea and Guide Local. One is to reflect consumer behaviors in the context of elasticity. So Ms. Yoonji Kim, another professional researcher at Sungmyung, will introduce her work in connection with Korea Emissions Trading Scheme, KETS. Please welcome.
Good afternoon. This is Yoonji Kim, a researcher from the Climate and Environment Modeling Lab in Sungmyung Women's University. I am here to present the integrated impact analysis of Korean emission trading scheme for application of guided local model. Here is the index of presentation. As you already know, this is South Korea's 2030 index target. South Korea has set this target of reducing 40% GHGs emissions below 2080 levels by 2030, excluding sinks and offset credit. The target translates to a 37% reduction of domestic emissions by 2030 compared to 2080 levels. On the right side, the estimate of emissions under business as usual in 2030 is 731 million tons. We need to reduce to 119 to meet our NDC goal, excluding sinks and offset credit. Under the assumption that the market is perfect, the carbon price represents the marginal abatement cost of GHGs. I will be introducing an effective carbon price that results in 5 million, 12 million ton emission after reduction. In deriving the carbon price, we consider the substitute relationship between fuels and products in a fuel. These are the two representative methods of substitution relationship. The first one is translog model. The second one is login model. The login model proposed by Coins satisfies the condition that price elasticities are negative. You can find here one of the major reasons why I decided to use login model method to estimate substitute relationship between fuels. Our approach in this study involves a two-stage nested structure, which aligns with the concept of producer decision-making framework. Under this framework, producers select a fuel to minimize energy costs in the first stage. Oil, gas, coal, electricity are considered in Model 1. In the second stage, to minimize overall cost, they select the optimal fuels within the chosen product. We focus on the oil and electricity sector, considering them as detailed products in a fuel. Within the oil sector, substitute relationship of petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, bunker-C, naphtha were considered. In the electricity sector, substitute relationship of petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, bunker-C, naphtha were considered. In the electricity sector, we investigate the relationship of coal, oil, gas, and the other, which are the energy sources utilized for power generation. These are the equations used for estimating relationship of substitution by applying nonlinear iterative regression method. We use South Korea's national energy inventory data for estimating equation and simulated with BAU emissions from guide local model. Our major purpose is to delay marginal abatement cost for achieving the 2030 carbon emission target. This simulation flow is to explain how to operate MAC module by using elasticity model output. In the carbon price, if one unit change, each fuel price increased by individual emission factor. Change in price basically causes change in demand. So the demand for each fuel changed to reflect the elasticity of substitution between fuels like oil, gas, coal, electricity derived from the stage 1 model. When there are shifts in the prices of these energy sources, it can result in change in the proportions of electricity generation mix. In the same way, we can identify share chains of oil products like gasoline, diesel, LPG, naphtha in the stage 2 model. This process allows us to derive the change in the optimized energy mix caused by a 1 unit increase in the carbon price. Each energy source has an individual emission factor. The final GHG emissions can be calculated by multiplying the change demand by the respective emission factor. This graph shows cost share of fuels. Oil accounts for approximately 70 or 80% of cost share. Electricity about around 15%, gas at 10%, and coal at 5% in South Korea. These are the results of linear logic model and elasticities. As you can see, all models are statistically significant. Please see the diagonal array in the elasticities table. You can see that the on-price elasticity of most energy sources in the 3 models is elastic with an absolute value close to 1. Only naphtha is relatively inelastic. Except for the diagonal matrix in the elasticity table, they present substitutional elasticities to each other. All energy sources in the model have a substitution relationship with each other. Specifically, the petroleum in Model 1, naphtha in Model 2, has strong substitutional relationship with other fuels. These are the emissions after reduction in 2030. We can calculate the emissions after reduction by subtracting amount of reduction from the BAU scenario. Renewables for production of electricity are not listed in the table because they have demand but zero emissions. With a carbon price of around 80,000 won, South Korea's 2030 NDC of around 512 millions of total emissions is achievable. Table shows the cumulative abatement rate divided by the carbon abatement amount compared to emission under BAU in 2030. The curve is concave. At the carbon price of 80,000 won, the abatement rate is about 32%. Imposing a carbon price of just 1 unit would reduce CO2 emissions by about 8%. We also apply this approach in air pollutant. I will introduce some results about effect of air pollutants such as SOx, TSP. Simulation data is from the guide local model. This graph shows SOx emissions reduction rates from BAU emission in 2030 by energy-intensive industry. More than 10% emission reduction of SOx is expected at the carbon price of 30,000 won. Emission reduction of SOx is most noticeable in refinery and petrochemical industry. This graph shows TSP emission reduction. TSP emission reduction is most noticeable in non-metallic industry, whose TSP reduction rate is more than 30% if carbon price is above 40,000 won. The Korean Emission Trading Scheme launched in 2015 mandatory ETS. It covers around 74% of South Korea's national GHG emissions. The KETS covers country's largest emitter in the power, industrial, buildings, waste, transport, and domestic aviation sectors. The target management system facilitated the collection of verified emissions data and training in the MRV process. So we can get annual database gathered through mandatory reporting regulation in KETS. We analyzed the effect of KETS using this data, applied the same approach that I explained in front slide. We just focused on the industrial sector of in fact, I derived a new estimate and simulation result for losing data. I'm not listed detailed information in this page, but I will show you just some results from this simulation. We just focused on the industrial sector of KETS. The reduction effect is noticeably shows in core. The total reduction rate is almost 30%. If carbon price is above 100,000 won. These align with the findings from the national inventory data that I introduced. This graph shows individual sector reduction rate. In sector with the highest share of core in the energy cost, the most substantial reduction rates are noticed. For industries with lower core consumption, the reduction rate are around 25 or 30% at 100,000 won. These are the energy-intensive industry, steel and petrochemical. This graph shows similarities that I explained from slide. Cement and glass industry almost same trend about cumulative reduction rate of fuels. Last, I will talk about our conclusions from this research. My major purpose is to derive an appropriate carbon price at national level and KETS. We try to derive a more sophisticated carbon price through a two-step approach that considers not only fuel but also products. This is because changes in demand for individual products within the fuel have a significant impact on the total amount of emissions. Another important thing is that just by imposing a carbon price, we can achieve an 8% reduction in emission. This is similar result in the national aspect. The results showed that the reduction rate from 2022 ETS allocation or national total BAU emissions is around 30% at a carbon price of approximately 100,000 won. However, this framework is an econometric model that does not account for factors such as facility replacement or investment or physical interactive effect. Thank you.
Thank you. That presentation provided us a lot of insights. Next, let me introduce Professor Jung-hun Woo at Konkuk University, the renowned professor specifically in the field of air pollution and climate change. He also has an experience with the IPCC. Professor Woo will deliver a presentation on Guide Global, including its air pollutant emission projections and their policy impact. Welcome him with a round of applause.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jung-hun Woo from Konkuk University. As I've been introduced, I'm very glad and honored to have a chance to introduce the Guide Global and Guide Local as well. I am development project focused on Northeast Asia. Let me start with this slide on atmospheric processes because I'm coming from the air quality field, science and engineering, and atmospheric process of the concentration is start from emissions. Delta emissions will end up with delta concentration, which also have the impact from climate, meteorology, and atmospheric chemistry. So the concentration is not a simple thing. So it's consists of domestic and transboundary and natural influence. But the final goal of this management is to protect human health. However, we need to understand the emissions inventory, which has information of socioeconomy, resources, and energy use with control policy and technology, with the plus of the natural sources. So we need to understand a sequential understanding of integrated assessment or the reverse understanding of optimization. So for us, we are living in the Korea, South Korea, which belongs to Northeast Asia and the globe. And as you see in the left, the lower left panel, it's only 6 countries, including China, Korea, Japan, and North Korea, Mongolia, and eastern part of Russia. It's only 6 countries, which takes up like 2.8% in terms of number of country, but it's like 30% of emissions in the globe. So basically, we actually put a lot of pressure in the global climate system and air pollution as well. So the structure to fight against this air quality issue, like NECAP program of Northeast Asia, or IPCC and UNFCCC over the globe, and also we need to consider, to helping the local and central government to fight against implementation plans for air quality and climate change as well. So let me move on to the next topic, which is AQUINIA. AQUINIA is an acronym of air quality in Northeast Asia, which is collaborative research project for local and international experts to understand and find some better strategies to air quality management over Northeast Asia. And it's the experts from China, Korea, Japan, and the international organization like EASA. So, however, when we consider air quality, we need to consider energy too. So we have to consider net zero, the carbon neutrality issues over Northeast Asia, we brought the regional expert with for the energy modeling and air quality policy modeling as well. So we have meter guide system of North Korea, the South Korea, and message abacus for China, and aim gains for Japan. For other than that, we use gains model for of EASA. So we set up 3 scenarios for energy, which is baseline and old NDC and net zero as well. And we link those energy scenario with air quality scenario with no control NFC and control MFR. Here is the list of assumptions in the local energy models in the right-hand side. You can see the different model with different similar scenarios. Here is the brief introduction of the final product from the 6 coordinated effort for North China, South Korea, Japan, North Korea, Russia, and Mongolia for energy emissions, air pollutant emissions, and concentration and health impact. The health impact also include the aging effect of each population. So you see, at least we have all those kind of integrated assessment results for the 6 countries in the same unified platform. However, it takes a lot of effort actually to harmonize them into one platform. So you can see the PM 2.5 concentration for year 2020, and we have 6 different maps, the concentration maps with different scenarios. So we end up having the best scenario, net zero, maximum feasible reduction scenario for year 2050. In South Korea, we have very cleaner atmosphere. That's what we are expecting. Here's some so-called waterfall diagram, which give us a concentration by different scenario in the upper panels. That's the baseline scenario for year 2020, and the best scenario, net zero MFR for year 2050. So each bar graph are disaggregated with the source. The first one is natural source and transboundary, and the region, the national, but it's not in the same domain. But the last one is local. So if you see the South Korea is very much affected by transboundary emissions, mainly from China and North Korea. And if you see China is very much affected by their own country. For Japan, also transboundary is weak because it's a little far away from China. North Korea is just above the South Korea, so transboundary effect is high. But their local impact is also high, even though it's much cleaner because their emission is low. Russia and Mongolia both have a natural component is high. So those kind of, the present has different characteristics, but for the future, we are expecting much better air quality in the future, some because of their domestic control, some because of transboundary impact, lower transboundary impact in the future. Here is the population exposure by PM2.5 concentration. We are expecting a much better the pollution exposure in the future. And the total effectiveness by scenario at 75 gap closure shows us 7% of efficiency, less cost in the future with the best scenario. Not the best, but it's a better scenario. But the 7% is a little disappointing because this is a huge effort scenario. But as you see, that Korea, you see China difference is very low in terms of cost. But the Korea, we have 10 times better, less cost because of transboundary impact is much lower from Chinese impact because this is all the effort from each countries. So some countries benefit from their own policy. Some countries that benefit from the transboundary, less transboundary influence. So we need to interconnect these two together. So for this one, we learn that the result of local and national IAMs give us a very different structure, but give us very good local knowledge into the common platform. But it takes a lot of effort to make a unified platform. And also it could be depend on the aggregator or aggregating model. In this case, we use Gaines model of EASA. And also the previous research demonstrate this for development of a collaborative one unified model and unified analysis scenario and analysis method. So we decide to go with the single model. So the Guide Global project, as the Ms. Zhang introduced, is motivated by this kind of region. So we actually developed country-based model, Guide Korea, for a while ago, and we now try to expand to the global model with focus on Northeast Asia, because we had we think Northeast Asia was a big bad guys for the past, but it could be really a good engine for the future solution. So we are developing a Guide Global model with focus on Northeast Asia, and also we are expanding a subdivision to more detailed model, for which we call Guide Local model, to support local and national government to fight against implementation plans. So here is the goals of Guide Global model. I'll not go over everything, but basically is the extension model of previous Guide Korea model, which we took the Northeast Asia is our focused area, but still try to understand the impact at a global scale. And also we have a South Korea and each 17 different regions with different energy models together. That's what Sookmyung University and Professor Yu's group is working on. So because since we don't have a experience for developing global model before, so we have in collaboration with EASA, message engage team, to generate, develop the same structured model with the same modeling framework with our Guide Global modeling system. For the Guide Global model, we work with Kongguk, Seoul National, and Gyeonggi, Sungsil, and other companies. And also for the Guide model, we work with Sookmyung Women's University. So for the stage one, this is the second year of the development project for Guide Global and Guide Local model. So we, the three sections of our collaboration team is developing message gauge model and Guide Global model and Guide Local model simultaneously. So when we get the model, and we work together with EASA to go into the global community with our own scenario for the future. So the strong regional scenario with the global understanding would be quite important in the future, the future collaboration for IPCC or UNFCCC. That's what we are believing now. So here's summary. So we make some Northeast Asia focused research work, and we had a collaborative research work for climate change and air quality management in Northeast Asia, which we called Aquinia. And based on the understanding or insight from that project, we moved to develop a global and local model, which we called Guide Global and Guide Local model development. So we are hoping to make them with collaboration with EASA, and also try to give some insight for the climate change and air quality community in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. It was extremely helpful as we sometimes overlook the impact of air pollution when we look at climate change. The presentation of the last but not least is by Professor Nabosha Nakicinovic, Vice Chair of Group of Chief Scientific Advisors at European Commission. He had served this year as a tenured professor of energy economics at Vienna University of Technology, and he is also honorary and distinguished emeritus scholars and former Deputy Director General at EASA. His presentation will primarily focus on air pollution and health, which aligns with one of the themes of COP28. So please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here at the Korea Pavilion in this session on air pollution and climate change. And as you can see, my focus will be primarily on how to achieve the synergies between the two areas that are really important, in particular focusing on the PM 2.5, which is one of the biggest dangers for the human health, and I'm really happy that at this COP there was also a health day, so related to our joint work. And my presentation will be based on the work of my colleagues at EASA, but as you have heard, also my colleagues in Korea working on guide models, so some of the messages I have will be resonant of what you have heard before. Let me just start with the following slide. Arguably, the world is at crossroads. We have, through explosive development, achieved enormous things in the world, but at the same time, there are negative consequences on the Earth systems. We are transgressing planetary boundaries, are in some cases very close to the tipping elements in the Earth system, and if that was not enough, many people are left behind in poverty. But nevertheless, the progress has been really incredible. Since 1800, beginning of the Industrial Revolution, global economy grew 100 times, energy 50 times, and emissions about 30 times of carbon dioxide. So that gives you an impression that we are also ever more efficient, but the emissions themselves are enormous. They have led to the temperature increase of well over 1 degree, about 1.2 right now. And we are definitely heading to exceed 2 degrees before we come down, even if the mitigation is successful. Now, on top of it, from the air pollution, ambient air pollution, there are probably somewhere between 7 and 8 million premature deaths in the world, about 2 in Asia from that. So this is yet another challenge for people, in particular those people who live in poverty. So I just wanted to amplify that, and I think the way forward is to fulfill the Paris Agreement and the 2030 agenda with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and I would like to focus on the synergies. So the first is about next slide is about the concentrations of the PM 2.5, both natural and anthropogenic, that you can see in this map. So here in Dubai, we also have very high concentrations, but mostly natural. If you compare that to the anthropogenic ones, then you can see that Asia is really a hotspot, and this is why the collaboration between EASA and the guide modeling teams is so important to see how we can reduce that. If you looked at the regional level, on the right is the global picture, number of people or population of global population that's exposed. And then you can see if you take a very stringent health level of 5 micrograms per cubic meter exposure, then only 5% of the global population benefits from relatively healthy situation. If you take a higher level of 10, then you can see that's about 20% of population. But if we move to the second and the third bar, which shows East Asia and South and East Asia, then you can see that the burden is significantly higher. And this is why this is a priority area. So this is, I think, on one side. On the other side, we have climate change, carbon dioxide. What you see here is what I call carbon law. Basically, today, we are emitting 40 billion tons, 40 gigatons of carbon dioxide worldwide, and tragically increasing, rapidly increasing. To achieve the Paris Agreement, we have to do exactly the opposite, achieve the peak as soon as possible, and half the emissions every decade. That means from 40 billion tons down to about 20 billion tons by 2030, approaching net zero by the middle of the century. Otherwise, we will be missing the goal of eventually stabilizing below 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees Celsius. But if that was not enough, there is a second component to that, is that the Mother Nature is very generous to us and is removing about half of those emissions through biosphere, through ocean and land sink. That's blue and green area that you can see there. And this is likely to decrease because of the climate change and other influences on the Earth system. And this is why we will probably need to remove some carbon from the atmosphere, hopefully through nature-based solutions. But carbon capture and storage with biomass, if it's done sustainably, could be also an option. And many people are talking about also direct air capture. So in any case, it's a threefold problem. So this is why it's important to see where there are synergies with air pollution, because air pollution is exceedingly high priority because of the health issues. So we basically know what needs to be done, redirect investments. It's easier said than done, but that needs to be a very high priority, decarbonize electricity and all of the other end-use sectors. So end-use, demand-side options are really important. They are listed here. I will not go through all of them. But let me also say there will be sectors that will be very difficult to decarbonize, like freight transport, aviation, shipping, heavy industries, and agriculture. So we are dealing with really multiple problems. Now, let me just show you anthropogenic side where the synergies might be. And again, this is based on the joint work that you have already heard before me in this session. On the vertical scale, you have $1 million, so I will just say trillion. 1,000 million is a trillion. With the current policies on the climate change, the investments would need to be on the order of about 2 trillion per year. Just with the current policies. We live in a 100 trillion economy, so that's about 2% of the global economic output. To achieve 1.5 degrees, according to the work of my colleagues, we will need a little bit more than 2 trillion. But you can see marginal increase is not that high between the world that's a kind of a disaster world and the world that would stabilize at 1.5 degrees. The difference is only, in quotes, about 230 billion with quite lots of uncertainty. Now, if we add air pollution, just that you have a perspective, with the climate policies, we would have many synergies with the air pollution, but on top of that, to eliminate air pollution significantly, we would have to spend another $500 billion per year. So we are talking about 2.5 trillion investments in order to go in the more sustainable direction of development. So that's the first message. And then my colleagues have worked on the 4 scenarios on which this message is based. The first one is just national policies that are already in place. The second one includes the NDCs in addition to the national policies. That means future commitments of the countries. Then the third one would include the policies that would be required to stabilize climate eventually toward the end of the century below 2 degrees and hopefully also below 1.5 degrees. So that's the third scenario. And the fourth scenario is additional measures beyond these climate measures that would be required to eliminate the air pollution, in particular in Asia. So these are basically the 4 scenarios. Let me show some of them to you based on the integrated assessment models comparison that also went into the IPCC. So you have the 3 most important pollutants, sulfur dioxide, NOx, and then PM 2.5, on which I will be focusing. And you can see the blue emissions, the range of the models. That is, as I said, national policies and NDCs. And in all of these cases, you could see after initial decline compared to the base year, the pollutants would be increasing worldwide. Green is 1.5 an effect, co-benefit of stabilizing at 2 or 1.5 degrees on the air pollutants. Again, absolutely significant, really significant. But for 2.5 p.m., lots of additional work is required. Those are the red curves. So in all cases, there would be a requirement of the additional requirement to reduce the pollutants, but in particularly for 2.5 degrees. So that's basically the picture out of the work that has been done at YASA in Korea. So let me now focus a little bit on Asia. And this is, I think, also the data that Young-Hoon has shown before, maybe just in a slightly different way presented. So we have the base year here, anthropogenic sources of 2.5, and you can see how red some of the areas are, in particular the urban areas. There are two, I've put 2 arrows here, one for the 5 micrograms per cubic meter, and the other one is for 35 stabilization per cubic meter. So you can see the red is well above 35, all of the red areas. So here's the first scenario then, national policies. If I go back, you can see there is a significant improvement in many of the regions, but still quite a lots of red, lots of lives lost. Then if you look at the 2-degree policy, again, just contrasting it, again improvement, in particular in China, but additional measures will be required to be in a good place. 1.5 degrees is even better. So you can see here there is a huge difference between stabilizing at 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees for the co-benefit for the air pollutants. So that's quite important. And then the third one with additional policies, it all looks very good. Many people will be enjoying very healthy air in Asia. So this is really a must. Now, let me come slowly to the concluding part of my talk. On the left, you see potential life lost in Asia in the base year, this time 2015. About 2 million people die prematurely from about 8 million worldwide. With national policies, I'm afraid, according to the results of my colleagues, that would increase to well over 3.5 million per year. So significant life loss. The co-benefit of stabilizing climate would save about 500,000 lives per year, that's shown with the arrows. And then with the additional policies, we would be going back down to about 2 million premature loss. So all of these policies will be required, and it's really a tall order. I mean, it will require Herculean effort in both directions, on climate mitigation and air pollution mitigation, and not doing those two things in silos, but rather integrating the policies. So I'm close to my summary. Let me just summarize these results for you. First of all, currently only about 120 million people in Asia enjoy clean air. That's mostly outside of highly urban areas, and as you've heard, quite a lot of that is transboundary air pollution. That's about 3% of the population. Now, the current policies would reduce the death toll or the danger to human health from the air pollution in Asia. But still, with current policies, the number of people under danger and prematurely dying would increase to about 3.5 million per year. So that's very significant. Synergies between the climate policy and air pollution would save about 500,000 lives per year. That is very important because that means that about 460 million people, or about 10% of the population, would already breathe clean air in Asia. So it's a significant result from my perspective. But combined Paris Agreement and air quality measures that are consistent with the SDGs, with the 2030 agenda, if they were implemented across Asia, would reduce the mortality significantly by over 40%. Now, the conclusion I would say would be that considering anthropogenic sources only, I mean, this does not include the natural sources that I've shown at the beginning. This kind of combined policies of air pollution mitigation, in particular PM 2.5, and climate would bring Asia to about 35. That most people would be below 35 exposure to 35 micrograms per cubic meter. That means that would be a significant improvement, and then over 1 million, or about 20%, would be exposed to the concentrations that are well below 5 milligrams per cubic meter. So that would be a huge, huge benefit. Well, I've exhausted my time. I just wanted to thank my colleagues in final remarks who have done this work that I've tried to summarize. Let me just say, I think that collaboration with Korea and IASA is really important. Korea is a very strong member of IASA, and I think collaboration here on the guide model in particular is important also for my colleagues in IASA. But I think it has also a bigger importance because the contribution to the Integrated Assessment Modeling Consortium, which is the community of people working on climate mitigation with integrated models, is very important because the national perspective brings much more granularity than the only global models can provide. So I think this is kind of bottom-up and top-down closure on air pollution and integrated assessment. And I would, of course, like to acknowledge my colleagues from IASA who have done all of that work, and also your team and other teams in Korea that have helped. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting all the crucial messages for our planet, and especially the co-benefits for the policies that tackle both climate change and air pollution. Thank you again to all the presenters for sharing with us various insights. To enrich our understanding and exchange ideas, we would like to move on to the panel discussion. Please allow me to invite again Professor Jung Han-woo to moderate the session, as well as our distinguished panelist, Professor Namosha Nakichinovich, as introduced earlier, Professor Do-kyung Park, professor at Yonsei University, and Dr. Alistair Ritchie, who is a director at Asia Society Policy Institute. Please come forward and let's give a big round of applause.
Maybe I'm better to stand up instead of sit down. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so I'm very honored to have a chance to be a moderator, and it's originally Professor Seung-jik Yu who designed all this session. So I'm very much hope he has a better condition now, and I can wave a hand to him because he's watching us now. So, okay. Thank you very much for all the presenters to give very insightful presentation. And I have three very distinguished panelists here to give us a good, nice insight on this issue. Let me start with the closest member here, Professor. Let me see. Professor Do-kyung Park of Yonsei University, Korea. Please start your panelist discussion. Sorry. Please give us big applause.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the 4 presentations. It was excellent and a learning process to me. I'm an international lawyer, so I'm not familiar with economic things, etc., scientific things. The only 2 terminologies accustomed to me, was a Paris Agreement and the carbon law. But carbon law is not law as such. So, but Professor Naki mentioned that current policies are not sufficient, and we need effective implementation for air quality or for carbon neutrality, etc. So I just want to raise one maybe simple, maybe difficult question. I saw the slogan on the street for COP28. It was from ambition to action. From ambition to action. So how can we guarantee effective implementation for air quality control or carbon neutrality or whatever? The thing is that every country is focused on national interest issues, not global interest issues. So how can we make the policymaker to do action? In Professor Wu's presentation, the last page, he has a citation. A lot of science is to provide valuable, careful information to policymakers to help them make well-informed decisions. But if we come to the reality, the policymakers are not moving at all, especially in my country, unfortunately. Our policy for climate change is moving backwards rather than going forward. So how can we make the policymakers to do something, to do action? And especially the topic is global stock taking here. According to Paris Agreement, Article 14.3, after the global stock taking in 2023 and every 5 years, the UNFCCC inform each parties to do something for next NDCs, for more stronger and more ambitious NDCs to make. With this GST result, they want parties to make more ambitious next NDCs. But if they do not act, what we can do? I mean, we have to think about, we have to worry about our future generations. But they are not acting at all. Especially in Korea, we have already President Yoon. He is not much interested in climate change issues or environmental issues. And maybe next year, we have bigger problems. We may have a President Trump in the United States next year. So I wish to have your opinions about that. Thank you.
So, Professor Park, is it the question to the panelists or presenters? Or anybody? Anybody want to give an answer? Professor Naki?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your comments. I mean, first of all, you might understand I will refrain from making comments about President Trump. I listened yesterday to the interview with Russian foreign minister, and he also said he will not comment on the American election, so I will not either. But let me just say that I think some of your comments were really pertinent, and let me address the first one about the carbon law. You know, the carbon law, at least for me, is a metaphor. It's a law like the second law of the thermodynamics. It's a natural law because it's prescribed by the carbon cycle, at least what we know about the carbon cycle, what I've shown. So, you know, the higher the emissions are, the higher the concentrations in the atmosphere, the weaker will be the sinks. And then there is a gap that we have to fulfill. But it's not a legal law, and I think that was your, so to say, your complaint about the role of science in making the decision makers understand all of that. And I think there are many ways to respond to that, but I'll be brief. Number one is, I think that we have all the tendency of showing always very negative things, kind of scary stories. And that's probably true. I mean, the threats and challenges are absolutely huge. But at the same time, I think it is important for policymakers to understand that there is also a positive story. And the synergies between climate and air pollution, I think, is a very important positive story. And that message has to go through. That we don't have to work on these problems separately. They can be done together through synergy. So I think that's important, and it's a positive story that might incite policymakers to take more action. And then, I see two of my colleagues here working on energy end use. It's a very similar story. Energy end use, demand side measures are cheaper, they're faster, they would lower the air pollution, it would be a huge benefit, would lower the air pollution and certainly would lower also the greenhouse gases and offer probably a better life for everybody. So in any case, that would be my comment. But I agree with you that the message of the scientific community is not heard. For me, this is a kind of a paradox, because science takes a long time to answer questions. Politicians have to decide immediately whether they're decision makers in general, private sector and in governments. They cannot wait for our answers. I mean, I think this is one challenge. The other challenge is that the scientific community does not necessarily speak with one voice. You are trained to have different opinions, to disagree on details, that decision makers very often misunderstand for huge uncertainty. Yes, there is uncertainty, but we do agree on certain things, like that there is a synergy between air pollution and climate mitigation. Oh, maybe the last thing, you talked about the vision and that we need action. So I would argue that vision is required for action as well. So, but you need both. If you just have a vision and don't follow it, I think this is why we are in so much trouble globally right now.
Thank you, Professor Naki, for your insightful comment. And Dr. Alistair, do you have anything to add on these questions? Not okay. Let me move to the Dr. Alistair Rich, the director of Asia Society Policy Institute, for your. Please start your panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Wu, and it's really great to be here and to be part of this event. I've learned a lot from these presentations, and it's really interesting all this effort that's going into connecting the air pollution and the climate change, and very fascinated and impressed by the modelling work that all of you guys have been involved in. I think I've got some, I guess, comments and questions around the work. I mean, firstly, I think that in having worked and in terms of climate policy, there's always a challenge to drive more ambitious emission reduction targets. There's pushback from industry saying this will be a big problem competitively, etc. But the benefit of this work is to lead to the health impacts and the health benefits of mitigation action. And I noticed from some of these presentations, it talks about the ground level concentration impacts, and the Korean modeling is going into 17 provinces. And I'm very interested to understand to what extent might this modeling work actually lead to monetization of health benefits. So looking at mortality and morbidity effects, and looking at the direct, the huge value of these health benefits. And this could also be an important element of the climate policy decision making. So when the KETS phase 4 cap is decided, and et cetera, balancing the costs and benefits is more easy from an air pollution point of view. And I think it'd be interesting to understand to what extent are there sort of like population-weighted mean concentrations being developed, and applying that with exposure response functions, and then using that to monetize those benefits. I think the other interesting opportunity is about the burden sharing, because in a country like Korea, as we saw from this presentation, the industrial reduction is actually quite small compared to power sector and other sectors. So that's the opposite in the EU. Now, it would be interesting also to understand the role that this modelling can play in the burden sharing of reductions between industry and agriculture, transport, etc. The other thing that we saw in the work is that the carbon price is expected to be 80,000 won, Korean won per ton by 2030 to achieve the Korea's NDC. So I think this is, it would be interesting to understand to what extent is the reality of the Korean carbon market, should that estimate be adjusted to reflect maybe there's a lot of allowances in the market which has depressed the price, and perhaps the real carbon price to achieve the 2030 NDC may not be as high as 80,000. I don't know, but it would be interesting to consider and connect the theoretical work with the reality on the ground. And the EU had about for 10 years, the EU carbon price stuck at about €5 because of the surplus of allowances. And it only shot up once the market stability reserve was implemented. So I think it would be very interesting to try and combine the theoretical with the actual. The other area of interest is in the modelling, well, in terms of the KETS, so it's interesting to know about how the KETS is going to take effect. So I think in the modelling, it's perhaps making an assumption that the carbon price is having an impact on energy consumption. So there's an assumption that the retail electricity prices are directly impacted by the carbon price. But at the moment in Korea, there's a limitation on the pass-through of the carbon cost to electricity prices. So is the modelling assuming that that limitation is removed? Can the modelling help to be used to try and get this interaction with the power market more effective? And then the other interesting thing is about the modelling shows that achieving the 2030 NDC will be costing this 80,000 Korean won, etc. But one of the other benefits of the KETS, which I'm not sure if is taken into account, but it would be good to consider if it hasn't been, is the additional value. The KETS works in two ways. Number one is the carbon price, which I assume has been modelled, but number two is the climate finance. So the auction share in the power sector, is that modelled, and if not, could that be a consideration? Because there's potentially hundreds of billions of dollars of money available to generate money to support projects, which could be additional reductions. I don't know, but so these are sort of some observations. But overall, I'm really impressed with the work, and I think this can be a powerful, the global, the local, the different levels of this modelling, and I think this can be a powerful supplement to both the air quality and the climate change policy in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Professor Nebosa Naki Senovich. So I hope I can pronounce your name correctly.
Perfect, but please call me Naki as we all work together.
Thank you.
Well, I had the opportunity to talk, so maybe I'll just comment on what I've heard in the panel discussion. Well, a generic comment that I have to make is I take no credit for this work, and I agree with you, because colleagues did it here in Korea and at IASA, so I agree with you. I think this is really an important contribution on the way forward, that one can achieve huge synergies. And if I may, let me just go back to the gains-range model that was developed at IASA. In fact, I think I would argue this is probably one of the greatest modeling successes, and I can say that because I was not involved in that model. My colleague Marcus Amann led that work, and Zig Clement now leads the work, who was also part of the team. The point is that model was used in the European community to set the transboundary air pollution guidelines. and legislature. And the way that was achieved, and maybe that's part of the answer to the first comment, how to make decision makers listen. The way that was done was the decision makers, the modeling team was in the same room as the decision makers. They would ask questions, they would run the model and tell them what the result is. With all of the uncertainties that might be in the model, but it clearly showed, and we have that same situation here in Asia, the modeling clearly showed that mitigating emissions, for example, in former Eastern Germany and Czech Republic was much cheaper than doing that in Austria and Germany that already had lower emissions. But of course there need to be some compensation payments because that air pollution came over the border. And I mean, you have also shown that that's exactly the situation that we have in Asia. Air pollution from China comes to Korea, also to Japan to an extent. So I think there is a transboundary issue if you're going to look at the global perspectives. And this is why I think it is important to have the national contributions, to have that granularity that you cannot do it, without zooming down in the detail. So from my point of view, I think this is one of the really, really important ways forward, is to try to work together with the decision makers. In some cases, like integrated models, that take a long time to provide an answer, so it's a kind of a handicap. You have to anticipate what the questions might be. But the air pollution model on its own can react relatively quickly, at least range-GAINS did. So that's how I would see the way forward. And then what I said before, that's the second comment. I think that, there is no doubt that carbon pricing is really important, and we did a scientific opinion for the European Commission as advisors to the College of European Commission on the energy transition, and we clearly recommended pricing of the carbon. In the second opinion, we also recommended that there should be a similar tax on unhealthy food, and all of that stuff is controversial, but I would argue that this is not enough. We need other regulatory mechanisms. I'm not sure, you presented those elasticities. I'm not sure we will achieve it alone through the carbon price. And again, let me go back to the demand side. After all, we all consume certain services that result in these emissions. If we can transform ourselves to go for healthy food, to go for clean energy services as consumers, but of course collecting the carbon tax, that would help then provide income for people who are excluded today. In Europe we also have about, right now 10% of European population is estimated, that's about 50 million, that cannot afford energy. So if the taxes would be collected to subsidize people who are at the risk of poverty, then I think we can, on the demand side, really do a lot. And I think research shows that it's very attractive, and it's something that has been underestimated in the decision making. Usually people look at the supply side, carbon capture and storage, nuclear, renewables. That's all important. But I think it is more important to look at our behavior and how we behave as consumers in order to achieve a better future for all of us.
Okay, thank you, Naki. Actually, we expect another panelist, Professor Seung-Jik Yu, as a first. So I want to be a first panelist in this panel discussion. So thank you very much for Professor Park regarding to the role of law and politics too, and also Professor Dr. Rich on the trading system and everything like the more economical instrument, and also Professor Naki on the the experience in European and international perspective. I'm coming from more science field, more natural science field, into more management and planning. So I wanted to share my experience and thought on this issue because I felt there's two big groups of scientists and also the policymakers or the policy scientists in this group don't have a exactly same understanding or viewpoint. So scientists usually have more, working into more understanding perspective. So we had a huge field campaign with NASA folks to understand what would be the process and the region of Korean high fine particle pollutions in year 2016. So NASA brought two big aircraft, and also we provide a lot of ground and sea level observations, and we both of us use a lot of satellite together to make three-dimensional measurement, and also the chemical transport modeling system is working to understand what's happening in more five-dimensional structure. So what we discovered at that point is most of our fine particle pollution is coming from the secondary formation. It's like more than 80% is coming from secondary, not the primary. So, reducing amount of PM2.5 emission directly from the source is not helping us. It's the formation needs to be, reduced. It's like you mentioned, the precursor emissions need to be reduced. So that's something we discovered. But based on the 6 countries' research, we discovered the situation is different. I mean, Japan, Korea, part of China is secondary dominant. But part of China and Mongolia, North Korea, and Russia is primary dominant. For Mongolia, Indo is a critical point for the human health impact. So it's a different country has different situation and different characteristic, which needs different policy and implementation. So what we discover is science is giving us some clue to make a solution, but the policymakers or the managers, we need to understand and how to implement those kind of right solution into right place. That's something we discover. And another thing is we have to, talk each other, to the policymakers, to the scientists, because some scientists don't want to talk with policymakers because they're boring somehow. Yeah. So the policymakers they don't want to talk with really pure scientists because they are just say something they don't understand. So basically, the communities need to talk together, like Naki mentioned. We have to, work together and talk together to make something better. Make better solution. So that's one of the things we wanted to work to, have a better integrated assessment modeling system with more scientifically sound and also easy to understand. Another thing is like transition with justice. In case of Korea, we have in the westerlies, so the wind is blown from west to east. So that's why we have a influence from China. However, we have a huge amount of NOx emissions in the very huge the urban area like Seoul metropolitan area, and it transports to the more forest area like Gangwon province in Korea, so which has more elderlies living. So they thought this is very natural place with cleaner air. But the thing is, the ozone is forming very dramatically with the addition of NOx-rich plume plus biogenic VOC-rich plume in the suburb area. So in Gangwon province, we have a lot of trees which produce a lot of biogenic VOCs, which produce huge amount of ozone at the end. So the problem is the fraction of elderly people living in that area should be high now and higher in the future. So in Korea, maybe energy problem is no longer a huge problem for in the light of justice. However, the aged population problem is getting getting more and more serious in the future. So that kind of things, maybe learned by the science maybe necessary to give us a direction for the future prevention or protection to our elderly people. That kind of thing is something that I wanted to work with as a formerly scientist, no longer scientist anymore, but still, yeah, I wanted to integrate this information together to make a better solution or more scientifically sounded solution. Okay, maybe time's almost up, so I have to wrap up this discussion. And thank you very much for the presenters and panelists for their great presentation and also the discussion and also the so audience in here and from the internet and especially Professor Seung-Jik Yu. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much, and please give us a big hand. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go, can you have a group photo? Especially with the audience as well, maybe. Thank you for being with us for the whole time. Yeah.